And ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to see you all this evening. Thank you for making the time. It is 5 o'clock. We go for 45 minutes. You know how it works. We do this every Tuesday and Thursday, and we interview really interesting people. These are people who know a thing or two about success. They've made it, they've climbed their own mountain, and now they are spending a little bit of time just sharing that with you. And this evening, I'm joined by Luke Ellis, and we'll talk about Luke in a second. But I make the point that getting to the top or even making a success of your career doesn't happen by accident. There's stuff you need to know. And we've talked about it, 10,000 hours, absolutely fundamental. Sometimes I think people think you just kind of wake up and you know stuff. You know, you hear people get up and talk at a podium and you think, wow, how did they figure that out? And you hear Obama speaking, you think, wow, isn't he amazing? It doesn't just happen, people. You've got 10,000 hours and you've just got to put the time in. And eventually, guess what? You figure it out. It's also about learning from failure. You know, I've had a ton of stuff in my life where it hasn't gone the way I thought it was going to go, drop the ball, and all kinds of stuff. And it's about learning. It's about figuring it out. You've got to do exactly the same thing. Some of you you're not getting the answers you wanted back from firms that you've applied to. Maybe you're getting rejected and you're feeling dejected. You're thinking, well, what's the point? Guys, when you fail, when you don't get the offer, when it doesn't come through, it's just an opportunity to learn, figure out what you can do better next time. Be curious. Remember, I gave you this expression. So worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish. If you just stick in your horseradish, everything seems like it's horseradish. You've got to get out of the horseradish. Look around, figure stuff out. Be curious. Be a person who's just interested in other people and interested in what's going on in the world. I bet when I talk to Luke, you find that he's one of those people. Own the ball. No one's going to give you the ball. I don't know whether you watched the rugby on Saturday, but I'll tell you what, everybody wants that ball and only one person has it at any given moment. Grab the ball. When it comes your way during your internship, pick it up, run with it. Score that try. No one else is going to give it to you. You got to learn to do that. Maybe you're a bit shy and like, well, grabbing the ball isn't my thing. Figure it out, work it out. You can definitely pick up the ball and you can run with it. When it's your time, learn to do that. Do the right thing. Have a set of values that guide you. Know what your values are. When you're in an interview and someone says, what do you care about? That should not be the point where you're thinking about it for the first time, right? Know what your values are. Know what drives you. When you get up in the morning, what's your sense of purpose? What's it all about? When you know all that stuff, you can string it all together. That, my friends, is when you meet with success. So tonight, as I say, we are talking to Luke Ellis. I've known Luke for many years. He knows, as I say, he knows all about the secrets to success. And Luke, you've always been a strong supporter of this project. I know when it all kicked off back in June, Jonathan Sorrell, in that conversation way back then, he said, I remember in the conversation, he said, the first person I'm going to call on this is Luke, because I know he's a massive supporter. I know when John was at Man, I know that you gave him a ton of support there in what he was trying to do. And I know as an organization, you know, this is front and center for you. So we'll get into a little bit around, you know, why you care about this, what it is about 10,000 Black interns that you care about. But you know, you are the CEO of an enormously successful, hugely influential asset manager. I think at the last count, assets something like $123.6 billion. I mean, this is an enormous amount of assets. Your central mission is to deliver alpha, and you're an active investor. And I'd love to just get into that. So thanks again, by the way, for joining us. Let me just say,
pleasure.
You. And let me just ask you that question, Luke. I mean, what is active investment, and what is alpha?
Sure. So I think the way to think about it is the starting point of investing is to get the returns that an economy will give you. So the UK economy is growing at a certain rate, and so the average company grows at the equivalent rate, and so the basic return of the UK stock market will be roughly equivalent to the nominal growth in the country. If that's enough for an investor, then you should buy an index fund, a passive fund. You buy beta. Beta is the exposure to the growth in the company. On the other hand, for some people, that isn't enough. They're looking for something more. That's where active fund management comes in. That's where you pick which are the good companies, which are the bad companies. You buy the good ones. You sell the bad ones. You look for which are doing the right things around ESG, which ones meet with your values, and you hope by the process of buying good companies at good valuations and selling bad companies at bad valuations, that you can generate an excess return that's more than the one you get from the standard UK economy or whichever country you're looking at. And that excess return is called alpha. It's a return to skill. And one of the things of it is very easy to describe. That was a short version of describing it. There are a lot of people trying to get it, and so it's hard to achieve. It takes a lot of innovation, it takes a lot of creativity, but it's great fun when you get it.
And so, Luke, I mean, this alpha is this sort of magical extra bit that you get over and above just putting your money in the stock market. So it's easy to explain, but what's your particular USP or unique selling point? What do you do differently than other firms who are also going on the hunt for this extra return, this alpha?
Sure. So our USP is the whole firm is technology driven. So we have the biggest investment in technology and in quantitative processes within the fund management business in Europe, and one of the biggest in the world. And basically, we think that, look, we're in a world where computers are doing more and more of everything in our life, and asset management is another one of those industries. And so we believe in a mixture, in the same way as sort of, I guess, when you and I were young, not the people on the phone, the idea of having a chess computer was sort of science fiction. And then one came along and they were pretty bad, and then they got good and they beat the sort of grandmaster. And, you know, and now chess computers are incredibly strong. Humans plus a chess computer are even stronger. Well, our whole business is built around the idea that markets are much more complicated than chess, but it's the same idea. We use technology and computers to come up with the best way of processing the information in the markets, and to come up with that alpha, or to give consolidated information to the humans so that they can come up with the alpha.
So what's the bit that the human does? Because the computer can do pretty much everything, right? It can multiply numbers together 1 billion times faster than the human can. It can do pretty much a lot of stuff that humans can do instantaneously. What is that magic extra little bit that's the difference between the computer and the human? And by the way, I know that, man, you spend a lot of time looking at psychology and the way people think, and just that's always been a big area for you as well.
Yeah, exactly. But look, the simple bit is, this is what computers can't do. So, well, they can't do today. It's probably a matter of time, to be honest, but for now, computers are rubbish at interviewing people. They're rubbish at assessing emotions, energy levels, so on. In, you know, in a human conversation, and yeah, it applies over Zoom as much as it applies face to face, you are observing a huge amount of subtle movements that you don't even really notice. But your brain notices, you pick up, and you know, you have to think of the next question while observing what I'm doing. That's something computers find impossible today. And so the bit about collecting information and processing information and delivering it in a process form, computers are unbelievably good at. But the things that they're not yet great at is these bits which are about human interaction and certain elements of creativity, that they're getting better at creativity. And so what we like to do is let the humans focus on those things, and let the computers focus on the data processing and the information gathering. And then you can work out, you know, we'll do the bit that both we're really good at and the bit that's fun. Because the sort of collecting, you know, back when I started, you had to collect information about share prices. You know, you had to go and collect it yourself. There wasn't an internet to go and get it from. You had to go do it, and you had to write, you know, if you wanted to see where the price had been, you had to get a pen and paper and trace out a line. You know, now all of that's done by technology. It's much better done than we could do it. And so you can focus on the fun bit, because that was boring.
So look, you talked about when we were young, and about, you know, when you have to use a kind of pen and paper to sketch it all out. Let's talk a little bit about your journey, about from way back when. And I don't know how long you've been in the market. I've been around now 34 years. But for you, Luke, I mean, what was your journey? Just tell us a little bit about how you're CEO at Man now. I mean, but how did you get there?
So 36 years, I think. So I did go to university. So you meet a lot of people in finance who say they never intended to go into finance. It was pure luck. It sort of something happened. That's not the case for me. So I started off when I was young playing cards. We used to play cards. So sort of age 2 or 3, we played cards at home, and we played whist and things. Then about age 5, my grandfather, who was an interesting chap, he taught me how to bet on the horses. And so I used to bet with him on the horses, but you weren't allowed to pick it by the name or the colors of the jockey was wearing. No, you had to study the form and the odds and the percentages. And, and I basically loved all that, loved the pattern recognition. And we were watching one day, and there was the bookies at the race course. And I worked out that, there was like a 2-horse race, and both horses were odds on, which meant if you bet on both of them, you were guaranteed to lose. And I sort of said to my grandfather, that's not fair. Those odds aren't right. And he said, yeah, they are. I said, no, they're not, because the bookies win every time. And he went, yeah, that's the whole point. The bookies always win. And I looked at him and said, I want to do that when I'm older. And he nodded and said, well, okay, but we like to say that's going to work in the city. So I decided age 6 or 7 that I was going to work in the city. And at university, there were 3, again, sorry, this is sort of terribly old sounding when there wasn't the internet, but there were 3 city jobs in the careers room. So I applied for all 3 of them. I had no idea what I was getting into. I'd never physically been into the city, never mind done much research on what it meant. That was what I wanted to do. The first one that offered me a job, I took it. And from there, I made something of it. Sort of, I started at the beginning, as you did at the beginning of the derivative business, when you had to be able to recognize in numbers what was going on. You couldn't rely on the computers to do it for you. And I was pretty good at that. And sort of, pattern recognition is slightly my thing. Mixture of pattern recognition, and my sister and brother-in-law and my mother are all psychologists or psychiatrists, so reading people. And those are 2 pretty good skills to have in the city. So I got into that, and I basically, whatever it was they put in front of me, I just did my damnedest to be good at it. And so I had about 15 years in the derivative business until I wasn't enjoying my job anymore. My view is you do your best work when you're enjoying yourself. So I stopped doing it and wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. Found a friend, we're talking. Basically, he talked about this business he'd started, which I didn't know anything about, but he was struggling with. I said I'd go and help him. I stayed there 10 years because we built it from a sort of 50 million to a $15 billion asset manager. That was quite fun. And then I had a couple of years off, which was very good for the soul. And then I came to Man, and I've had 10 years turning Man round and end up running the business, which is, it's a lot of fun. Yeah. I got to say, I always thought that, just being part of a business was really good, and who wanted to be the boss. Turns out being the boss is a lot of fun.
So look, you've done your 10,000 hours, right? We keep talking about this point, and I think it's so important. And I just wouldn't mind you just expanding on that. What advice would you give to people watching this when it comes to the business of just getting your head down and putting one foot? I know John Sorrell often makes this point: just put one foot in front of the other. Journey of 1,000 miles, what begins with one step. That whole principle. Has that worked for you? Do you look back and you say, yeah, I've done my 10,000 hours. And then it's not an accident that I'm where I am.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. I think the one of the bits when you read all the academic stuff around the 10,000 hours, and I definitely have, you want to blend 10,000 hours with breadth as well, right? And sometimes people get stuck on a very narrow path, and especially early in your career, don't try and decide this is exactly the thing you want to do, because you don't know you haven't seen enough things. So you want to start as broad as possible and then bring it in over time. Eventually you have to specialize somewhere in order to really achieve everything. But I think the people that start very narrow often get disappointed in time. So that'd be the first thing I'd say. The second thing is people spend a huge amount of time worrying about what didn't happen before or what might happen tomorrow. And in the course of that exercise, they miss the fact that the thing you get judged on is how you execute in the now. So again, one of the things on the 10,000 hours of practice stuff is it's not good enough to just practice. It's got to be deliberate practice. It's got to be focused practice. You've got to be achieving something. When it comes to a work context, that is about whatever the job it is you've been asked to do, the little thing, big thing, whatever it is, do it to your absolute best. Don't say, I didn't want to do that. Don't say, hey, if I succeed at this, will you let me do this? Or I'd rather do that. Do the thing somebody's asked you to do it really well. That's the thing we all notice. The people that we promote, and every organization is the same as this, better or worse, but always driven by this. The people you give the opportunities to are the people who executed brilliantly on the last thing. The people that you promote are the ones that have been doing a really good job. It's not you never promote the person who's moaning that they want a bigger job, right? And you never promote the person who said, well, last year you didn't give me this, so it's my turn. That's not how it works in the business world, in the real world. It's like, here, you got it there, make your best at that. That's what people notice.
Yeah, I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, this is real gold dust, as I like to describe it. So put your questions in the Q&A, and if you ask great questions, we'll pull them out of and throw them across to Luke. But I love that observation around the 10,000 hours, around breadth, but also just doing what's in front of you. And if it's something that you don't necessarily think that you are good at, then you just keep doing it until you get better at it, and somehow eventually you figure it out. So no, that's hugely powerful. And I mean, Luke, tell us a little bit about the attributes that have got you where you are. Maybe not you specifically, but someone who's at the top. I mean, a typical CEO of $100 billion asset manager, that doesn't happen by accident. If you had to, I know you were betting on the horses when you were 5, and Grandpa Ellis took you down the bookies, and so you had a head for numbers, and I get that. But what are the other maybe softer skills, or just skills generally, that you would say, you know what, this is what if you want to get to the top, this is kind of what you need?
So I would say the number one thing is intellectual curiosity, right? The people who don't want to know exactly how something works, why that happened, what's going on there. They're never the people that are the most successful, right? People who are satisfied with what they know, as opposed to looking to know more. I am a nerd. I'm proud to be a nerd. My definition of a nerd is, if there's something I'm interested in, I want to know absolutely everything about it. And if I meet another nerd who might be a nerd in something, but like my best friend is one of the world's greatest fishermen. I am totally not a fisherman. I never want to do it. I like eating the fish he catches. But I will spend hours talking to him about his process, his thought process, his physical process, the kit he uses, because he's thought about it in detail, and you can learn from that. So intellectual curiosity is the number one thing. I think the other thing that is really, really important to success is intellectual honesty. And this is something that people often lose as they get more senior. And I've tried to sort of fight to make sure I don't lose it. And I have a whole load of friends and my wife who are all sort of trained to watch out for hubris in me. You don't know everything. And it's much better to say, sorry, I don't understand that. Ask the stupid question. If you don't understand something, ask, right? And I still do that today. I'm always happy to be the first one to put my hand up in a meeting and go, sorry, didn't get that. You whizzed some acronym past and I didn't know what that is, or you did this, or that. No, I might be supposed to know about it. Sorry, I'm a bit slow or whatever, but can you do that again? And that bit of Or being honest when you know and honest when you don't know is so important, because all jobs require you to make a whole load of decisions. And if you do it based on real information, you have a good chance. If you're smart and you've thought about it, you're going to probably make a good decision. If you are guessing because you didn't listen, you have no chance of being right more than once. When it's like a clock, you can be right once every 12 hours, but that's no good to building a career.
That's great advice, because we've all been there when that acronym PPC or GIA or whatever it is goes past. And you're like, what is that? I don't know what that is. And you're trying to work out whether everybody else knows. And there's this moment in time when you can ask, and most people just think, I better not say that in case it's a dumb question. And I love the fact that your point is, you put your hand up and say, what is that? What is PPC? What does that mean?
And the most successful people are the ones who put their hand up before it's passed by.
Yeah.
Because then they're never caught off sides later. Whereas the people who were guessing that, they might be right, they might be completely wrong, and then you really can get into trouble.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And Luke, let's talk a little bit about setbacks and what some people might call failure, when it just doesn't go your way. It's not what you were expecting. And, some people on the call maybe didn't get the offer they were hoping for, and it just feels like it's never going to come, and things aren't going their way. I mean, have you experienced anything like that in your career? And if so, what's your approach to failure and setback?
Of course, things have not gone the way I want lots of times, right? And people would call them failures or setbacks, or I mean, it's slightly trite, but I think of them as learning experiences. One of the rules that I've lived my life about is not spending any time on regrets. And so, one of the things is, we live in a world, in a universe, in a whatever, where you can't recreate history. So if you could, it'd be really good to go, hey, that thing that happened last week where I got it wrong, I'm going to go back and redo life and do it differently. But you can't do that, right? You can only operate on a forward-looking basis. And so I spend no time worrying about, oh God, if only I'd done that, this would have happened. So don't spend time on regrets, but do try and learn, okay, I made that decision. It turned out to be wrong. Was it that I had a bad set of information? Was it that I had a bad decision process? Was it that actually this was one of those decisions where, you had a 1 in 3 chance of being right, and this wasn't one of the 3? And that way you can learn and you can get better the next time. There are just a whole load of things that happen in life, and especially in investing markets, that are just in the noise of life that you don't have any choice about. All the people on this call, you're applying for internships. One of the great things of this program is to accelerate the access for internships for all the people on the program. But we get, what do we get? We at Man, we get something like, I can't remember what it is, I think it's 1,000 applications for interns every year. And we have typically 6 or 8 interns. Well, what is, if you don't get that internship, it might be that you weren't good enough, but it's almost certain that 990 whatever people aren't going to get the internship. And so it's almost certainly noise. There's no signal in somebody telling you didn't get that. It's just like, look, somewhere, we had to screen down again. And it was like, okay, there's a whole load of people lose out because of bad luck or just bad math. I mean, it's maths of 1,000 people and you're going to give 6 away. You can't give it to everybody. So, sort of don't get down on that. Just go again.
Yeah. And it's a skill, right? Not getting crushed and just feeling like this is a disaster, the worst day of my life. I don't know how I'm going to come back from this. It's a skill, right? Or it's at least in my experience, you learn it by practice, which is, it doesn't matter how bad it is, you step back and you just say, okay, let me work out, let me stay calm. I mean, staying calm when it's all gone badly wrong is, don't you think? I mean, it's completely
totally
key.
Yeah, exactly. there's sort of, as you mentioned earlier, I mean, I studied a lot around the emotions that come into processes in life, and trying to be calm and rational is so important. And actually, as I say, mostly you'll discover it wasn't that somebody didn't like you. The number of times where we've turned down somebody in one of these processes, or we do a lot of interviewing of managers, and again, we probably pick 1 in 2 or 300, and I'll meet one of the other 2 or 300 who didn't get the job, didn't get the gig a couple of years later, and they said, well, you hate me. I'm like, what are you talking about? So, well, you didn't pick me, you must have hated me. It's like, no, you just weren't the 1 out of 200 that we picked.
Yeah.
There were maybe 20 people in the 200 I hated. There might have been 5 that I loved, and frankly, there's another 100 and whatever that's just it's not their day. It's nothing they did wrong.
Yeah. Luke, I'm just going to switch to some questions. We've got some nice questions coming in. I'm just going to pick a couple out randomly. There's one around work-life balance. One of the things about the city, you've been there, I've been there. I've worked insane hours. We've all done it. But there's work-life balance in 2021, and for this next decade. What does that look like, and is it achievable, or do you need to just kind of kiss goodbye to any kind of work-life balance? Do you think if do you sell your soul, I guess, when you come into this industry?
So you definitely don't need to sell your soul when you come into this industry. There are firms where they're very proud of people working 24-hour days, and a certain organization made a sort of announcement they thought was really strong, that all of their associates had to leave. They couldn't work after 10 p.m. on a Saturday until lunchtime on Sunday. And they thought that was a good announcement. I mean, look, that's crap, right? If you're tired, you don't do good work. So I've worked hard. I definitely have worked hard in my career, but I've never, ever pulled an all-nighter in my whole career, right? That idea you have to do stuff like that is rubbish. Personally, I'm good in the morning. I could get up early and I can operate really effectively, but I get pretty ropey pretty quickly in the evening. I mean, nowadays I just like to have a glass of wine, but I've never been an evening working person. And so working late, never really, so the number of times I've worked past, aside from social, entertaining clients and so on, number of times I've worked past 8 p.m., not that many. Right? You have to work really hard when you're at it. You don't have to work all the hours. Yeah. I don't work weekends. I've never liked working weekends. I think having a break, the brain needs time to refresh. So you can do all these things. What matters is the product you push out the other side. Look, if you want to go out night clubbing every night, and that's your idea of work-life balance, there's no chance you're going to be as productive as somebody who gets a good night's sleep. That is basic science, right? But can you go and have fun at the weekend? Absolutely. Can you, go out and see your mates and be sensible in the week? Yeah, absolutely. You don't need to do those things. The other very small trick for everybody on the call, which is a silly but a simple trick, and there's a lot of academic evidence behind this. If you get into the office 5 minutes before people, for whatever reason, they assume you've been there hours. On the other hand, if you stay in the office 5 minutes after other people, they assume you went home the moment they left. I have read a bunch of stuff as to what drives that psychology, but it's absolutely true. If you're going to do something in terms of trying to prove you work hard, get in early. So if people tell you they start at 8 o'clock, get in at 7:45, maybe 7:30. You don't have to get in at 6, right? Because you only have to be there 5 minutes before people and they think you've been there forever. And don't hang about in the office trying to prove you're the last one to leave. There'll always be somebody who's one of these weird people who can't do anything productive until they're under some terrible deadline. And they're the ones who hang about in the office until stupid hours, and honestly, they're pretty useless people. So, you mentioned, look, I run the second or third biggest hedge fund in the world. And okay, at the moment, nobody's in the office, but when we're in the office, so what I get in somewhere around 7 o'clock and I turn the lights on almost every day I get in, I'm the first one in. And I leave at 6 o'clock pretty much every day. But by 7 o'clock, there's less than 1% of people in the office. And we are, touch wood, very successful. So, you don't have to work a stupid number of hours. You do have to put your all of your mental efforts into the job while you're doing it, right? You can't spend your time calling mates and looking around on the internet. You've got to focus when you're there. But, that sort of work hard, play hard thing, work hard, play hard, sleep hard is a good idea.
Yeah, that's just great advice. And in my time, I was a lawyer for many years, and lawyers don't start until middle of the morning, but then they carry on until midnight, which is what I did for many years. But when I eventually switched and became an investment banker, the biggest secret, the thing I learned early and I figured out, was be at your desk early, and it's a game changer, right? I mean, it means you've got to get up at 5:45 or 5:30, but which sounds, if you're a student, you're like, in what world does anyone get up at 5:30? But you get used to it, and if you leave, as you say, at 6, you've got your whole evening. So getting up, okay, it doesn't have to be 5:30, but you've got to be in the office early. And as you say, getting in at 7:30, 7:45 every day, you're well set. And as you say, once you're there, if you're just going to faff around, you will find you get to the end of the day and you've still got 6 hours work to do. But if you actually do what you're supposed to do when you're there and you're efficient.
The funny thing, so my son he's 25. He's now been in our industry 3 or 4 years. And I gave him this advice, and he's my son, so he ignored it. But he thought I was talking rubbish, and he said, no, they tell me I only need to be in at 8:30, so I get in at 8:30. I said, Rory, just try getting in 10 minutes before whoever the first person is. Just do it for 3 days. That's all I asked. It took a while and then he tried it, and he called me up and said, oh my God, Dad, I've had so many compliments about how hard I'm working this week. And the answer is, I got in half an hour earlier than I normally get in, and they think I'm a superstar, whereas, it's half an hour. So
yeah, great advice, ladies and gentlemen. This is good stuff, and it's these little tips and tricks of the trade that will help you to just get that thing they just call marginal gains. You don't have to be miles better than everybody else, right? Or do things miles better. You just got to do them a little bit better. Classic example right there of a marginal gain, just a little bit better. Right, I'm going to take another question. So what has helped you stay motivated all these years? So people look at you, Luke, and they're like, here's a guy who's, look, you're the same age as me pretty much, and you've been in the industry for 30 odd years, and you're still as pumped as you were 3 decades ago. What keeps you going?
So it's intellectual excitement, intellectual curiosity in what we do.
Yeah.
The brilliant thing of financial markets is they are continuously changing and evolving. And there is essentially nothing going on in the world that doesn't have some impact on financial markets. So you have to be broad, but you also have to be deep in terms of what's going on, and the effects change and morph. And so you cannot crack this job. Yeah, I will say, and it's an important thing, the thing that motivates me isn't money. Okay, when I started, when I was, the age you all are on the phone, look, money mattered a lot, because the thing I remember is I was very focused on being able to earn enough money that I could both drink and eat every day. That seemed like a pretty good point. I was willing to take the trade-off for a while, but I wanted to be able to, that's a sort of, you get there, and then you get to where you can afford to have a reasonable life. And after that, it has to be about the intellectual stimulation of what you do. It has to be because you love doing it. And I can't imagine you could have more fun than doing this. And so I do it, and that is it's the beauty of this industry, because you can't get it. You can get it right at any one moment, but tomorrow what was right today won't be right. So you've got to constantly be readjusting.
And do you have a sense, Luke? I mean, do you have a sense that you're adding to the greater good of humankind in some way? I mean,
yes.
yeah.
I you know, is that true in every job that I've done in my career in the city? No. You know, I can look back at some of the derivative stuff that I did many years ago, and you do wonder quite what that was all about. But, you know, today, so you talked about that number, we run money for, depending how you count it, 40 or 50 million retirees, either retired or future retirees. That's basically who we run money for. And one of the really interesting things is when you spend time, you realize that the average pension paid out by the people that we run money for, that's therefore the people we're really running the money, the average pension is sort of 20 or 30,000 a year. Now, when you're young, that sounds like quite a lot of money. When you get to being 65 or 70, that doesn't sound that exciting to live off for the rest of your life. And if they can get not 20,000, but 25,000, not 25,000, but 30,000, because the skill we have in our fund management gets them a better pension pot, that is really valuable in terms of what it does for the people that we operate for. And they're the main reason we do it. You know, at the same time, we're able to do a lot of good things for the community we live in. And, you know, that feels to me a good thing as well.
And I'm just going to pick out another question here around. I'm going to get let's get a little. It's not technical, but this question of of generating alpha, which is what you do, and you do it brilliantly. But at the same time, you've got decreasing fees, says one of our questioners, and you've got the rise of passive investing. Would you still advise a young analyst to pursue a career in the active management industry, or do you think the passive investment industry? If you were making the call now, would you go active or passive? What do you think?
So it depends what motivates your mind, what gets your brain stimulated. Look, I think passive investment is a very valuable tool to enable people to do their investing with minimum cost, where what they're after is just the fundamental growth. It's not very interesting. That's the whole point about it, right? It's not. There aren't lots of developments, lots of change. It is a uber scale, minimum cost thing, minimum friction. There's just, I mean, you know, if you like complicated puzzles, it's not a complicated puzzle. It's a simple puzzle. That's the whole point about it. The active management industry is about really complicated, interesting puzzles. Now, for me, that gets me out of bed every day. And, you know, people say, look, why didn't man do passive? And the answer is, we're the wrong people, because it would bore all of us. And we'd be bad at it, because if you're bored with something, you're sloppy about it. And passive is something you've got to be really focused on the detail. And there is an absolute skill to it, but it's a different skill than the intellectual challenge of complicated puzzle solving. Active management is here to stay. Right, and the fees may have come down over time, but the fees are still remarkably good in active management, and the margins that active managers make are remarkably good, looked at in any normal industry. And I'm absolutely sure over the next 10 or 20 years they'll go down. But if intellectual stimulation and puzzle solving is what you like, it's a fantastic place to work.
Yeah. And listen, one of the things, Luke, that we talk about a lot on here is those three letters. We talked about acronyms, and E, S, and G are right up there in terms of factors that these guys need to be thinking about. And, you know, my advice is, if you're going to have an interview at some point, read as much as you can about E, S, and G, and kind of be up to date with it. Is that something that impacts you? You know, where's man on ES, on ESG? How big a deal is it for you?
Look, it's a very big deal, and it's a big deal in I think two different directions. So it's a big deal in terms of the companies and the assets that we buy and sell. And so, you know, it's a big deal because the people who all work for us believe in leaving the world a better place than we started, and our clients all are looking for that. And so we both feel it ourselves, and also that's where all the client demand is. So we're very focused on that side about making sure that the investments we do are creating a better world. And there's all sorts of things in there where you can think about how to do it. But also, as a CEO of a company, right? So look, I care a lot about governance because I'm in charge of governance in our business, right? And I care a lot about sustainability. This is an important part of our giving back to our communities that we live in. But we do a lot of things. I think it's really important that as successful people, that we contribute back more to society than we're taking out of it. That seems like a sort of natural obligation. And so it's like I chair a charity that helps kids in the sort of schools in bits of London where their options and experiences in life are pretty bad, and we give them a help up so that they can then be future 100 Black interns. We all have to help the communities, and if we don't get a fully diverse workforce in the city, we are wasting human capital, we're wasting economic opportunity. It's a more boring place, it's a less effective place. The UK will lose out to other centres if we don't have a fully, we have a great opportunity. When I first started in the city, it was, I'm afraid, totally misogynistic, racist in large parts, homophobic, you name it. But it's come a long way in the last 35 years, and it's come a really long way in the last 10 years. And, I really believe that we can, should, and do offer equal opportunity for people to succeed. Now, we have a problem that, the number of people who came into the city who were Black 30 years ago, you would have been a very unusual sight, Dawid. Well, in fact, you started in law, where it's, that means that there are less role models that you can see who've been doing it 35 years who are Black. That's shit, but it's a history problem. It's not a blocker today. And, I would say, this process is proof of what I see every day, which is, like in the real world, it's not everybody, but almost everyone in senior management positions in the city understands and is motivated to improve the diversity of what's going on, is to make sure that we are a fully equal opportunity work environment where people succeed based on merit, but also you're giving people the tools to succeed, right? It is much better to have, if all the people you've got that work for you went to the same public school and the same university, even if they are intellectually very impressive, as a collective unit, that's a pretty flawed group of people.
Yeah.
And you're much better getting people from different environments, different backgrounds, different education, bringing them together. You get better collective answers than the sort of cream of whatever, Winchester and Oxford can give you.
Yeah. Look, our time's gone. It's flown by. Thank you so much for taking the time. Means a lot. You're CEO of this enormous hedge fund. You're incredibly influential, and to take time out and come and spend it with these guys means a lot. I've loved listening to your top tips. Getting in 10 minutes earlier than the other person, I think, is genius. And look, thank you so much. Maybe we'll have you back on here again sometime on the program. But stay safe, stay well. Everybody, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you all again on Thursday. Kicks off again at 5 o'clock. We run for 45 minutes, and we will see you then. Thank you all.
Thanks, Dawid. Thank you, everybody.